Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on new integration, solving hybrid IT puzzle with UAC. I'm Lauren Tansini from Stonebranch, and I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, there's a few things we need to cover. This event is designed to be interactive, so if you have any questions, please add your questions into the Q&A field, and we will answer them at the end of the session. If we don't get to your questions, we will follow up with you afterwards. Additionally, we do have handouts, which are the integrations that we are going to discuss in this webinar. So you can go ahead and click on those and download them if you haven't already. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's session, Niels Boer, Vice President of Solution Management at Stonebranch. Let's go ahead and get started. Niels, take it away.
Hello, everybody. So today I'm going to speak about the new integrations which we have created in the last 6 months, let's say. Many of these integrations are directly coming from customer requests. So they requested to have, for example, integration for SAP RISE. So we built this integration. Yeah, so some customers will see their integrations maybe in the demo even. When we talk about these integrations, then they're in different topics. So we have integrations related to self-service, to container technologies, data pipeline, SAP, and Oracle. So these are, let's say, the areas which I'm covering today. All the integrations which you see on the slides, you will also find in our marketplace. I'll show you in a minute the web page. Today, I'm going to speak about the ones that you see here on the slides. So when we say self-service, it's basically self-service, for example, using ServiceNow. I think you all know that we have a ServiceNow task where you can, let's say, track incidents. If, for example, a task fails in our universal controller, then we automatically generate a ticket in ServiceNow. This is something which we have for a long time. But now we are going to the next level. And what you can do now in ServiceNow is you can directly from ServiceNow create tasks. You can trigger tasks, meaning schedule them. Even SAP tasks you can run now from ServiceNow. It's not only ServiceNow. We have also been working on Jira Service Management. It's now called Service Management. I think in the past it was called Service Desk. Now it's called Service Management. So in this one, it's the same. We, of course, have the incident management, but we can do also more in Jira. So, for example, we can create customers for the portal. We can add customers to your project. We can remove customers from your project. So we can also do some of the management tasks now in Jira. What is not mentioned here is PagerDuty, because that we have also for a long time. So also PagerDuty would be supported if you have this. Then actually, we have also self-service for developers now. And we had in the past always the jobs as code task, which allows you to develop your code in one of your development tools and then upload it to GitHub or GitLab. And then once you have uploaded it, you can automatically download it with this task to one of the controllers. So actually the task allows you to import and export task definitions. We support here not only JSON as we did in the past, we support also now YAML format, because this is also something which is used in many of these applications. Also in OpenShift, you will see a lot of these YAML configuration files. So this is also now supported. What's new here, especially in the Azure DevOps Cloud task, is that we support not only GitHub and GitLab, this was there all the time, but we support also Azure DevOps, as the name says, but also Bitbucket Cloud is supported. So we are trying also to, or we are also not trying, we are really now having also the integrations with these cloud repositories. So this is our jobs as code task. Then we have done a lot in regards to Oracle. So in Oracle, similar to SAP, there's the EBS system. And for EBS, we support now requests, submit concurrent requests. We are actually using there the conc sub request and CLI module to do this, and we can track the jobs, and also we can get the log files and so on. Then we also support the Oracle scheduler. So Oracle also has an inbuilt scheduler where you can run database scripts, stored procedures, but also programs which are stored in the database. And we support there just running the normal jobs, but you can also run chains. So this is also supported in Oracle. And then, of course, we can track the jobs and monitor them for completeness. When it comes to SQL, so I put this also under the Oracle header here. So we have a generic SQL ODBC task. Actually, this ODBC task is nice because it can connect to any ODBC database. And even an SAP HANA database, you can connect with an ODBC connector, or Amazon Redshift for not only MySQL, SQL Server, the ones that, but also these newer ones like Redshift or HANA, you can connect via ODBC. And this connector allows you to run any kind of database scripts, call a stored procedure, and even write the output to a file system in, for example, CSV format, comma separated. So you can select, for example, separator. So I think this is a nice task, and especially as it runs on the agent, so you can run it against your local databases without any firewall issues. Then actually container stuff is one of the hot topics. So only, let's say, end of last year, we got so many customer requests regarding containers. And one of the key technology they're using is Kubernetes, of course. And on Kubernetes, especially the OpenShift, so the Red Hat distribution. So it's basically the orchestration for the Kubernetes is the Red Hat framework on top, which is called OpenShift. Maybe the reason is because we have, of course, many mainframe customers, and they're usually having IBM computers, of course, and maybe they move them to OpenShift. But it's really the majority is really OpenShift, and but of course we have also customers with EKS, AKS, and native Kubernetes. So this is something I'm going to show you today, how you can run OpenShift jobs, but maybe also that we can also transfer data in your containers using our UDM protocol, because the agent which we have is fully certified for Red Hat and actually is constantly updated also against vulnerabilities using the Red Hat security mechanism. And then when it comes to SAP, so there have been also quite a lot of changes. I think you all know there's this SAP RISE, where SAP hosts your application server in one of the cloud providers that you select. And together with this SAP RISE, they usually also promote their business technology platform. So you can run things like SuccessFactors, Concur, or IBP, Integrated Business Process Planning. You can run on these platforms. And we have now jobs for, in this case, here the Integrated Business Process Planning solution, and also data services for BTP. Data services and IBP usually go together. So we have for each an integration, so you can run the complete workflow. And then we also support HANA XSA jobs. So you can run also jobs against your HANA database. And these are called Extended Application Service Advanced Model jobs. So those jobs you can also now trigger from our universal controller, run them in parallel. So this is really a big relief, because the current SAP HANA job scheduler is very basic. It even uses cron notation. No? Now you can put your HANA XSA jobs in a workflow and do all the things that you do in a universal controller workflow. Then we are working also a lot on data pipeline. So data pipeline is still one of the key topics. Also, when you talk to the analysts, they always tell you, oh, data pipeline is something you need to focus on, because it's also heavy AI driven now. And when I mean AI driven is, we have now, for example, you see there's these Azure Synapse tasks. This allows to run Azure Synapse pipeline, which we call a notebook. And in this notebook, you can have all kinds of machine learning scripts inside, which you can trigger from the universal controller, monitor those pipelines, and also restart them if they fail. We have also the intercloud data transfer task. This is a task which allows you to transfer data between any cloud provider, but also from on-premise to the cloud provider. I think we have now around 60 different cloud providers which we support for connection. The interesting thing is here the data is streamed. I will also give you a demo on this, and not just saved on a disk and then from there streamed to the bucket. We can directly stream from one bucket to another bucket. Then we have standard things like AWS Lambda and AWS Batch, so you can run Lambda functions, monitor them until they are complete, run AWS Batch jobs, also monitor those jobs. And what we are also now doing at the moment is we try to build, or we are building standard tasks for all the different CLIs. So when I mean the different CLIs, I mean Azure CLI, Google CLI, AWS CLI, OC CLI, so that in case we don't have, let's say, a full-blown integration for it, that you can at least run all your services. So the first one which we have here is the Azure CLI, but you will also see that we will soon have a task also for AWS CLI and the others also, and also OC CLI. So this is something which we are working on at the moment. Then this topic of GPG and GNU GPG, this is basically something which a lot of customers are asking this now, and we are constantly enhancing the tasks. And I will also show this today so that you can encrypt your files, decrypt your files. And we have also some special functions in which we got from customer requests that you, for example, can verify with an email signature if it was signed by the correct person, and so on. Okay, so then let's start. So in this case, I'm going to show you how you can run and monitor OpenShift containers, or OpenShift jobs, sorry, OpenShift jobs. Actually in OpenShift, what it does, it's, for example, starts a pod with containers inside, runs then maybe some calculations, and then it stops again, this pod. So it's like a batch job which runs for a few minutes, or it can even run half an hour. It's usually nothing which runs, let's say, a second. It's more like a few minutes or even longer. So what we have is we have this new task called OpenShift jobs. In this task, what you can do is you can define where you want to run, against which cluster you want to run your job. You can also define, of course, a project in which you want to run your job. So that's a namespace in Kubernetes. You can provide different kinds of login methods. We support all the ones that are supported by OpenShift. So you can use basic authentication, session token, and what I think is the most used one is service account authentication. That's actually used by the customers who have this task already in use. So they use, all of them use service account authentication. So actually the limitation which I'm writing here, sorry, this is not valid anymore. We also support Windows now. Yeah, so how can you start a job in OpenShift? So let's say you have two clusters, cluster A and cluster B, with your projects on this cluster. In this project, you have, let's say, maybe two container running or two pods which run containers. What you now want to do is you want now to run in project A, you want now to run a job, maybe start a job in start this container via this job. But you also want to run in project in cluster B a job. So what you can do for this, you can install Universal Agent on any server in your network, which has, of course, access to these clusters. And then on this server, you can trigger the job to run these OpenShift jobs. The nice thing is the OCCLI, which is used to trigger the job, is part of our integration. So you don't need to install any OCCLI on your server. So this comes together with the Universal Agent. So when you install the Universal Agent, then you install the integration called OpenShift job. Then this integration will automatically contain the OCCLI. So no OCCLI installation is required. So that's actually one of the deployments one of our customers is using. There's a second option. This is more container-like. So what you can do is you can start the Universal Agent in a container or in a pod in this case, deployed in a pod in OpenShift. And from there, you can run the batch jobs. The nice thing here is you don't need any external server. The backdraft of this solution is that this Universal Agent cannot start a job in the cluster B because this would require that you open a route, which you don't want to do between the two clusters. And so in this case, then you would need to deploy in each of the cluster one agent. So these are the two options you have to run the jobs. Now let me show you how this works, and then you also see the different possibilities we have. So this is my OpenShift user interface. There's actually one agent running. This is the agent which I've deployed in the pod, in the project as batch. So it's deployed in this pod. And so far I have no jobs running here. So now I want to trigger a job in this OpenShift project SB batch. So I go to my universal controller, and now I do the very simple, let's say, approach. So I have my job. Maybe I make it bigger that you better see it. So the only thing what I configure now is I say the action. In this case, I want to run a job. Then I select where my OpenShift cluster is located, so the URL. So this is the same as if you would connect to OCCLI. Then I choose the login message. In this case, you can see I choose web console token. So that's the main one that usually is used. Then I have my credentials for the OC web console. So in this case, the token. We also support token with very long lengths. Then actually, here in this case, I define where is my job resource definition source. In this case, I can choose local file or script. You will later on see I can also choose GitHub or GitLab. In this case, I just say the file lies on my Windows server on a UAC share, and this is the job deployment YAML. So this is basically the file that defines how the job looks like. So if I run this job now, I started in this case manually. You will see the job is running. If I now go to my OpenShift environment, then you see there's already a job. So immediately the job is started. And actually this job is a container. This is actually what it does. So it calculates the p-value with 3000 characters. So this is the job, how it's running. So I can go back to my job. This job, now it's finished. You see the completion is 1 of 1. So if I now go back to my controller and press the refresh button, you see the job was successful. The whole log file that you have in OpenShift is also available in the universal controller. So you have it also in nice JSON format so that you can use it also in a workflow for further processing. And you can see here what has been, that this is a job definition file that was used, the job was successful. So all the information is available in the log file. So that was actually the, let's say, methodology which you would use if you would put such a job in a workflow. So now you can put this job in a workflow and then run it dependent on other tasks. But what you can also do is you can start a job in a continuous delivery approach. So for this, I go to my GitHub. So I'm not the developer. So I go to my OpenShift YAML file. So that's basically the file that defines the job. And maybe I do some changes on this one. So maybe I change the TTL after finish. This is actually the duration when a job is automatically deleted. Oh, I think I have not the German keyboard here. Now let me check. 60, yeah, okay. Good, so now I put it to 60 seconds, so after 60 seconds would be automatically. If I now commit this change, then the job, I show you the job is gone, there's no job, then the job should automatically be triggered on OpenShift. Because, and I explain you later on how this works. So I do the commit change here as a developer. Now I go to my OpenShift, I do nothing. And you see automatically the job has been triggered in OpenShift. So this is a continuous delivery approach. How does this actually work? If I go to my GitHub, then on this GitHub, under the settings, I've configured here a webhook. And on the webhook, I put the webhook receiver endpoint of our controller, I put as endpoint. So this is the universal controller endpoint where GitHub sends a message. And then on the controller itself, I have a so-called monitor called universal monitor. And this universal monitor, what it does, it waits for the events when to come from GitHub. In this case, it checks, is it a push event, which it retrieves? Is the payload Niels for OpenShift? That's my project in GitHub. Then actually the landscape is dev. And I only want to take the ones from the main branch, because I don't want to get any events from the development branch. If I receive this event, then automatically I have here a trigger called universal trigger. So if the monitor goes to success, here's my monitor, then actually I run the task, run OpenShift batch UNC job. So like this, I can trigger automatically the OpenShift job with a push to the GitHub or GitLab or whatever repository you use. In addition, I send an email, you see here. So I should also have received an email. And you see it is here and it's new, it's all real. And in this email, what I'm doing, I'm just printing out what I just did. So I checked in some code to my repository. This is the repository URL and so on. So I can basically, of course, add here any information which is in the message from GitHub. Yeah, so this was the OpenShift job. Now let's continue with the next one. So the next one is actually ServiceNow. So in ServiceNow, I don't want to show too many slides here, just one slide. So ServiceNow, I told you already, we can do open incidents if a task fails, and then you can get the log file and all this stuff. This is all stuff which we had a long time ago. So now what you can do is you can now use ServiceNow as self-service portal and create your own jobs. So for this, I go in my ServiceNow catalog. So this is the ServiceNow system for everybody who knows it. And I go to services. And there is now something called UAC in the service catalog. And now I can do what I can have here all my self-service actions directly from ServiceNow against my controller. So I can schedule immediately a job, I can launch a task workflow, I can hold a task, I can release a task, and I can also create a Linux task, but I want to create now an SAP job because that's more interesting. So I choose SAP. Then actually I need to put in my access token. So because it's to have it secure. Finally, I give my job name. So I call it NBU, SAP job 01, for example. I give a description, SAP demo job. The email, because I want to get informed about everything what's happening while the job is created and so on. So I can give my request email. Then I want to, in SAP, for people who don't know SAP, you can start so-called reports, and the reports are in an ABAP format. So I start an ABAP report called ABAP Doku list. And I can also give a variant. For example, list view is a variant I know that exists. I can put the batch user and printer. What you notice here, this is not dynamic. So maybe that in our new SAP task from the controller, everything is can be selected dynamically. So you press here a button, and then all the ABAPs would pull up, which are in the SAP system. This is something I spoke already to Ravi, our developer of this ServiceNow task. This will come soon. So soon you will also have here a button that you can dynamically connect to the SAP system and select the ABAP, so you don't need to know it. Now I want to schedule the stuff. So I put here a trigger. Maybe I call this copy it from here, job daily, for example. So I want to schedule it daily. Then I choose maybe at 7 o'clock, every day at 7 o'clock. I put here daily, and then GR, for example, for trigger that I can better notice. Yeah, so now it will create an SAP job with starting a variant list view and the report ABAP local list. The variant are the parameters for the ABAP. And I will automatically also generate a schedule so that it should be scheduled every day. Of course, you can have here also specific days, business days, and so on. Yeah, then I ordered. Now it's ordered. So maybe let's have a look. As you see, there's also these checkbox. So now we go to the service catalog. And here you can see that there's a request ID generated. Here are the details again of the task. And also I can see there it's successful. So everything looks good so far. So what I've configured in this ServiceNow workflow, because I wanted to make it a bit more interesting, I configured also a Slack approval. And you see, if I go to my Slack, it has already popped up. So approve the job to create this task and trigger. Because maybe this ServiceNow person can generate the jobs, but you still want someone else who approves it. So this is just an optional step, of course. No? So, but I want to show you that we have, of course, also this Slack integration. You see, NBU job created, ready for activation. So now I approve it. So once I approve it, now the job should be generated, and I should also get an email. You see, there's already an email telling me something about the situation when this job would run. So there's a nice graphic. So in this case, on this date, it might be a bit too much load. So maybe I need to rethink of putting it on another day. But I got also an email when this job is scheduled. So you see this job is scheduled on the next one on the February 29th at, maybe remember you put 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, the next one is 21. So this gives you some more information that what you have done is correct and you can sleep well, though, oh yeah, everything was fine. So if I now go to my universal controller, so I go to my controller logged in, and I go to the trigger. Then I set active triggers, the last one. And then you see the trigger was automatically generated. A trigger starts this job and it starts this SAP job. And if I look on list qualifying times, then you will see the job is started exactly as written in the email. To really see that it works, I can just trigger the job now, that you really see that an SAP job is started. So I manually trigger it. So if I now go to my activity, you see SAP job is running. And if I go to the retrieve output, then you see, great, no? ABAP docu list is started, and list view is also started. So the job has been started successful, and you can be sure it's nicely generated now in SAP and ready to work. Okay, so this was the ServiceNow one. So you saw how you can run in ServiceNow now per self-service, or create a job and run it, and also trigger it with different possibilities. Okay, now the next one is cloud data transfer. So I think you all know that we have this cloud data transfer task, and it supports many different storage systems. And you can transfer from S3 to Google, from Google to Azure, and so on. Also SFTP, you can transfer from an SFTP server, from SharePoint, and many others. What we can do is we can copy the stuff. Of course, you can move things. You can also sync directories, and you can also say how deep you want to link them. You can do a copy to or move to, that meaning you can copy a single file and rename it. And you can also copy a URL. The other thing is that you can, of course, also remove objects. And yeah, and what's nice, you can use regular expressions and match pattern, and even mix them both. What's also new here is on this cloud data transfer version is that you can do very fast transfers, because you can first of all define that you want to run transfers in parallel. And let's say if you have many files, then a parallel transfer will increase the speed a lot. But you can also do so-called chunking of a file. So if you have a large file, you can chunk this file in different pieces, and then at the end put it together, similar like in the mobile phone. So this is something how you can increase the speed of your transfers. You can also perform dry runs just to try out your transfer. I just put here, I don't want to go through these, I just want to show you these are some of the integrations. So we just had a customer, I think it was yesterday, someone of my colleagues implemented Box also, so Box is also supported. All the ones you see on the list we can support. However, the ones in black are per default tested. If you have one, for example, if you now have Sugar Sync, then of course I can set this up for you, and then we would also make it here black. There's another page, so you see there's also China Mobile, Elastic Object Storage. There are also some, let's say, ones maybe who are not that used here at the moment, but Huawei Object Storage is, I think it's widely used quite widely. So all these things are supported, and you can use them with our cloud data transfer task. What's now also new in this version of Cloud Data Transfer Task is the observability feature. So generally, we generate now observability data for all the different components of the universal controller and agent. Especially for the integrations, we provide measurements which are integration specific. So for example, for Cloud Data Transfer, we provide measurements like the transfer speed, the average transfer speed, the max duration. So all things which are, let's say, really specific to this integration. The same we do for the SQL task. So on the SQL task, for example, you can measure how many rows have been extracted and those measurements. But generally, when we speak about observability, it means the controller, the agent, and these universal extensions, like the intercloud data transfer task, they generate metrics data and trace data, and this is collected via the OpenTelemetry collector, which is a standard in the market. So I think everybody who has an APM department uses OpenTelemetry. That's like the standard. And we collect these data via OpenTelemetry, and then you can visualize them in your tools. So actually in my demo, I've done everything with open source tools. So I'm using Grafana to display the information. I use Prometheus to store the metrics and trace metrics data. I have Jaeger for the tracing. Kibana Tempo I'm not using in my demo. But of course, you can also just use one single product like Dynatrace and then connect it to the OpenTelemetry collector. We also have a metrics API just for completeness. I put it also in here, so you can also get some metrics data via web service. But generally for observability, I think you would use the OpenTelemetry collector. Okay, now let me show you quickly. So what I have here, I want to show you one file transfer task. In this case, it's downloading a big file from Amazon S3. Hide this one. So if you want to download something from an S3 bucket, the task is always very simple configured. It's always the same. So you choose your action. In this case, I want to copy, so I choose copy. Then you choose your source system. In this case, it's Amazon S3. So S3, you can have different source systems here, and you can select the source system by clicking on this button. Then all the source systems which are supported will be shown here. I will not do this now because I don't want to mess up my task now. Then you choose the credentials. In this case, I just use the Amazon account credentials, but we support also role-based access and all these things. Then you choose the file path from where you want to extract the files, and you put here your filter. And this filter, actually, you can put here regular expressions, but also match pattern in the filter. And you can also have an exclude filter. In this case, I'm downloading a very big database file, a Parquet file from the S3, and save it on the source. And the source is actually my Linux system, and I'm saving it to this directory in the Linux system. And what I'm using now these multi-streams parameters. So here you can put all your additional parameters. That means I'm only transferring this with one instance. So this will be very slow because one instance is just transferring the whole file in one go. So now I run this task. And then you can see it. Maybe I can put some more nice information here. Column progress, for example. Progress. So now you see that. Okay, so now, and maybe the duration, I put the duration here also. Duration seconds. So this one took 18 seconds to download it. So now I want to show you the effect of this new parameter. So in this case, I put now, let's say, 4. So instead of 1 stream, I put 4 streams. So it takes now the file and puts it in 4 chunks and then transfers it again. So I launch this task again. So before it was 18 seconds. Now hopefully it gets much faster because now we are transferring in chunks. This was not so much faster. Just check. Because I did not save. Okay, that was my problem. Sorry. So now I run it again. So. You see, now it was 9 seconds. So it was even almost double the speed by just using these small, parameter callings, chunk the file in multiple streams. One last thing I want to show you, if you have the same thing, now you have many files, and there you can use this parameter, the parameter called transfers. So that means it tries to transfer the files in parallel. And depending how much CPU power you have and how much your bandwidth is, you can increase this number as you wish. So in this case, I just use one transfer, so it will be very slow. So if I do this now, it takes quite a long time. And afterwards, I will just say now transfer this maybe with 8 threads, so 8 parallel streams. So then it should get much faster. Like this, you can transfer really a huge number of files, maybe thousands of files. You can transfer very fast if your machine allows to do this, of course. 27 seconds. And now if I put this, put here something like 11 and run it. You see 5 seconds. So you see it really is much faster if you play around with these parameter. Of course, there's a default parameter set, so you don't need to play around all the time with these parameters. So that was something I just want to show you on the new one. Now, very quickly on the observability. So I told you that we collect these metrics data and all the stuff and show this in a nice dashboard. So what we have for this, we have first of all, we have a startup guide created in our documentation. So in the official Stonebranch documentation, you can just go to Universal Automation Center Observability Tutorials. And then actually we have, first of all, we have also a video. The video shows really in depth how to configure this observability in your system. But this is just a startup so that you have something to play around with. Later on, you can then speak with your application monitoring department, and they would know how to connect to your OpenTelemetry to the OpenTelemetry connector. So, this tutorial is really made for a beginner. So it really tells you everything. That's how you software you need to download. So in this case, the OpenTelemetry, the Prometheus, and the Grafana. It's all open source. Then I put here all the different scripts that you need, how to install Prometheus. I even put the soft link, so it's really that you can follow it one by one. And once you have done this, then you will be able to see your metrics in a nice Grafana dashboard. The video really does exactly what I'm showing here. So it's really one by one. If you want to also do metrics, then you can do the second video. So there's another video, another where it shows you how to configure trace data. So this is the second tutorial. When you do this you can do afterwards, then you can also collect traces. What you have also in this documentation, and I think this is interesting, is that you have a lot of default widgets. So I said, so widgets to start up. So this is coming here. Sorry. A second. Yeah, it's called example widgets inside Grafana. So this gives you some startup widgets. Maybe you want to know how your OMS servers which are started. Maybe you have 10 controllers and you want to have them all visualized in one Grafana dashboard. So this tells you how to configure this. There's always an example. Then you have here the configuration in Grafana, but there's also the JSON code, so you can directly download this stuff to your Grafana dashboard. And then you might be interested in maybe to see if your OMS server is online, or how many active OMS client connections, how many tasks have been started. So there are a lot of, let's say, default widgets which give you a nice startup with these things. To give you an example of such a dashboard now, what I've created for you. Just need to go to the controller. So this is first my Prometheus database, which collects all the data. So on this Prometheus database, you see here are all the metrics which we are collecting. So there are metrics called with UC. So we connect the license model history, the server status. So really lots of information on the controller. These are metrics on the agent, on the extension. So for example, I collect the transfer bucket, the transfer counts, and so on. So you see many different metrics are collected, which you can then visualize in a Grafana dashboard. And this is an example of such a Grafana dashboard. This one you can also directly import into your Grafana dashboard once you've done the startup tutorial. So it shows you the number of objects which I've copied, for example, from a local system, from a Linux source, from an AWS target. Then it gives you all kinds of things, how many tasks I've been running, how many instances are laid, how many Linux tasks I've started. So lots of different information, the OMS server status, how many connections I've done to OMS, also the licenses. So for example, I have licenses for 2 ZOS agents, and you see I'm still under 0 because I have no mainframe connected, but I can have up to 2. Also the agent license, I have 2 agents connected, but I can have maximum 10. So then I get always informed. And I have also here, the tracing from Jaeger, so I can directly go in here and then click on one of these, for example, and then it shows me the Jaeger trace directly. So here's then the Jaeger trace. I think this is more for people who are a bit into this. So it really shows you the trace of a task. So you see this was a sleep task, and this was started by, the login user was OMS admin. This is the task name, and so on. And so you can also do the Jaeger trace. The nice thing is this Jaeger trace is also directly available inside the universal controller now. If you press right mouse button on activity, you can say trace, and then you get this also. Yeah, this was the dashboard which I wanted to show you. This is something, if you need help, you can just call me, and I will also support you on this. But I think the startup guide is quite good to follow. Okay, so now we have one last topic. This is the Azure Synapse. So this Azure Synapse task is to start a pipeline which contains usually notebooks, one notebook or several notebooks in Azure. And then you can monitor the pipeline while it's running. So for success, for example, you can restart the pipeline, and you can also restart a pipeline from a certain point in the pipeline. Maybe it has several notebooks inside, or you can also cancel a pipeline, or cancel a pipeline even recursive. These Azure Synapse usually is used together with other products from Azure. And I know customers who have all these in place. So you usually collect data from different data sources. For this, we have our intercloud data transfer task. Then actually you might ingest this into, for example, a data lake, maybe Azure Data Lake Gen 2, or some AWS data lake. So this you can all do with the intercloud data transfer task, or you can stream it with our pipeline task for Kafka pipeline or for SQS pipeline from Amazon, for example. So if you don't want to just store it there as with the file. Then actually you use, in many cases, you use things like Azure Synapse or also Azure Data Factory. Before maybe Azure Synapse, usually have Azure Data Factory in place. So we have also a task for Azure Data Factory, which is also used by many customers. So you can also grab the data and then use it later on in the Azure Synapse notebook. Once the Azure Synapse notebook or pipeline which start the notebook has been started, then you might do further analysis and you might visualize the stuff in Power BI. Also for Power BI, we have an integration. So you can build basically the whole Amazon blueprint or Azure blueprint within our universal controller with the intercloud data transfer task, data factory task, the Azure Synapse task, and finally the Power BI task. Okay, and now in my Azure portal, I go to the Synapse workspace, and I go now to the Synapse Studio to show you a bit the stuff while it's running. Log in. Okay, there we are. So I go to the monitor and you see nothing is running at the moment. 2 pipeline has been succeeded, nothing is running. So now I go to my universal controller. I go to my Synapse integration. Yeah, so actually for the Synapse task itself, so it's very simple what you need to do. You need to basically tell in which location you want to run it, your tenant ID, then the client secret and ID. So it uses the app registration to start the pipeline. Then actually you can have a certificate. This is new for which we've implemented for one customer. I think it's important. So you can have your certificate stored in the agent, but you can also have it in a certificate file. Or if you don't want to use certificate, you can choose also none. In the future, we will also have the Windows certificate store to store it. This has not been yet implemented, so at the moment we have the agent default as certificate store and the file. This file can, of course, contain multiple certificates, not just one. So all the ones that you need to connect to your Azure system. Then actually, I want to create a pipeline run. So in this case, I run the pipeline in the New York Taxi workspace. So that's a standard Microsoft playground I'm using. And actually, the pipeline name. And maybe this one is a bit boring. Give me 1 second. Sorry, I need to. So yeah, because I want one with parameters. No, so the same one, but now with parameters. So I want to start the pipeline with parameters. The parameters I put here, I put 2 parameters. One is called node, the parameter name, and the value is API parameter, and the other one is called company, and the value is Stonebranch. To start with the parameter looks a bit nicer. Yeah, then actually I can launch the pipeline. Of course, usually I can have this in a workflow. I'll show this in a second also. So now the pipeline is started, it's running. So now I can go to my Azure portal. And if I refresh it here, I can also press the button. Sorry, no. And you see the pipeline is in progress. So it is actually started. So by this pipeline, actually, when you look at the pipeline, then you see this pipeline starts one notebook. This is called Stone Pipeline SB Demo Notebook. And in the notebook, you have all your machine learning code. If I go now to my controller, back to the controller, then you see the pipeline is running, and I can do retrieve output. And then it will tell me all the information about this pipeline. So you see, I've started this pipeline with the parameter API and Stonebranch. And yeah, it's currently in progress. So you can monitor while the pipeline is running in the same way as you can do from here. You have the same information, basically. What's also nice is, if I go here, I have not shown you, you see the parameters to really show you that it's true. You see here that parameters that it worked fine. So the node is the name, and API and Stonebranch are the values. So it also worked with the pipeline parameter. Yeah, while such a pipeline is running, because it takes some time, I could also cancel the pipeline. So I can go in here and then say cancel pipeline run and submit. You see now cancel pipeline complete. So I've canceled, I sent a cancellation request to, in this case, Synapse. So if I now do a refresh, you see pipeline is canceling. So I've canceled the pipeline now. And what I can also do is when a pipeline is canceled, maybe later on I decide, but I should still run it, this pipeline. I just need to wait until it's canceled. Takes a bit. Now it's canceled, you see. Now I can go back to my universal controller. Press refresh button. It takes a bit until it notices that it's canceled. In our system, when the pipeline, when I receive the canceling value from Synapse, then the pipeline, the task will go here in failed status. So that means I notice that it's canceled because I don't have a cancelled status here. So, but what I can do now, I can say rerun this pipeline. So I can go to the pipeline. And then I can take do a restart. And I just take my pipeline ID. And then actually I want to restart the pipeline. If I would know the activity name, I could also restart at a certain point in the pipeline. In this case, it's a bit boring because my pipeline has only one notebook, so it makes no sense. Now I can save it, and then I can say rerun it, rerun the pipeline. So if I now go to the Azure portal again, you see that it's you should see that it's really a rerun and not a restart. You can see this because if I go here, then you see that the pipeline is restarted. No? So it was a rerun latest. So you can really also rerun a pipeline, cancel a pipeline, and start it at a certain point in time. In reality, what you would do is, I'll just let it know until it's finished. So I show you just one example. So there is maybe a workflow that you see how you can integrate this in your workflow. There is my Synapse. This case. Actually, when you want to run several pipelines in a row, so you can put them like this, so you can start one pipeline after the other if you want to do this, if you don't want to do the Synapse functionality for the workflows. But what you can also do is, I think I have this somewhere. Last thing, I'll show it to you. This one is better. Now, this is then a real pipeline. So basically, you have your cloud data transfer task with streams data. And actually, you extract some data from an SQL server with the SQL task. You run an Azure Data Factory to store this stuff in a data lake. And after the Data Factory task, you run the Azure Synapse notebook with the data you find in your data lake. And finally, you run a Power BI task to display the data. So like this, you can just put your Azure Synapse task into any workflow. Of course, your workflows might look much, much more complex, but I just wanted to show you the concept of it. Yeah, what we have seen today is basically things about self-service. So you've seen how you can create your ServiceNow, run tasks. I told you that you have now a Jira Service Desk available and can create users and customers. Then I told you Azure DevOps has been improved, so you can now have Bitbucket Cloud and also Azure DevOps support in addition to GitLab and GitHub. We've done a lot on Oracle, so you can run now your EBS requests. We can schedule Oracle scheduler we can run, so you don't need to use cron notation anymore, so you can run really in real time your Oracle scheduler. We have a generic ODBC SQL task to connect to any database that supports ODBC. You see the container stuff in OpenShift. Of course, this will be constantly improved. So even today, I got a mail that people are doing it not directly via OC, but use a different framework for the continuous delivery. So we will look also in these topics if you have other tools. SAP, we are ready for this SAP RISE solution. So you can run your data services, integrate business processing, Concur, and all these tools which we can connect if you require this. And you've seen we are working also on the data pipeline, so you can run your machine learning notebooks, AWS Lambda, batch jobs, Synapse, and transfer and stream data in a very high speed between the different stuff. All these tasks you can have in an orchestrated way shown in the dashboard. So everything that's executed, you can have now in an orchestration dashboard, for observability. This was the stuff I wanted to show you today, and I hope you enjoyed the demos. And of course, if you need demos to one of these, which I have not demos, that we are also ready to do this.
Okay, we can go ahead and get started with the Q&A. We have a few questions. So here's the first one. Do you also have integrations with third-party observability tools like Instana, Trace, Datadog, and Splunk?
Yeah, so what we actually, the first one, what we are going to do is Dynatrace. At least I have several customers, I know several customers who use Dynatrace, and this is something which we already had looked into it. So that's the next one which will come up, and I will also put a startup guide then for Dynatrace. For Splunk and Datadog, this is also something you're right, which is important. But for now, I would start with Dynatrace. But of course, if you have a specific request, we can also do this, or support on this.
Great. The next question, how vast can the Snow integration be customized in relation to other used fields for background jobs in Stonebranch? Can this only create triggers or task, SAP task as well? Can this be used for jobs with multi-steps?
Okay, yeah. So it supports out of the box already Linux tasks, but you're right. So SAP multi-step jobs, it's something which actually I discussed yesterday with my colleague who was doing this. So it's for sure something which we will have soon, because we our new SAP task, which came out last release actually, supports now multi-step jobs. So it should be not that complicated to do. So for sure it will come. It is something which as I told, I discussed it yesterday.
Okay, great. All right, the next question, can you run other OpenShift commands than executing jobs?
Okay, that's actually a good question. So at the moment, we are already developing a generic OpenShift CLI. But for me, it was also important that this generic OC CLI supports also getting the deployment files, for example, from any repository like GitLab, GitHub, and so on, as you saw already on the OpenShift job. So we will soon come up with an OC CLI extension. I think it will not take long. So it's nothing which comes in the future. It's really something which we are already working on, and it's not yet fully ready, but the first tests have already been done. But it needs to be ready for continuous delivery. I think that's important, that you can connect, that you can retrieve files from repository, not just file system. It's the same as you saw for the jobs as code task, as for the OpenShift batch job task, where we got the data directly from GitHub, triggered by webhook.
Okay. Last question that we have time for. How soon can we get the ServiceNow request form integration?
I think I don't have any official date for this at the moment, but I need to speak with my colleague on this. But I think I need to follow up on this question. Okay.
All right. Well, that concludes our questions. There were a few more that we will follow up with after, but I wanted to thank you all for joining. When you exit this session, you'll be redirected to a short survey. We'd appreciate it if you take a few minutes to share your feedback so we can continue to improve our Stonebranch webinars. Later today, you'll receive an email that contains a link to the recording for today's session, which you can rewatch or share with colleagues. Also, don't forget to visit the Stonebranch Integration Hub to download the integrations that we discussed today. Thank you all for joining, and we will see you on our next session.